I'm going to start, and then that way we have lots of time for this amazing topic, and I'm sure we'll still have a few people logging in, but we will still be good to go. So welcome to our first Exemplify of 2023. We are very excited for the new year and for new sessions that we have coming to you. So today I am very excited to introduce our speaker, Jen Slay. Jen is a multi-award winning speaker, as well as the recipient of the prestigious Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal for her community work. Her speeches are memorable, entertaining, and dynamic. She has spoken for educational institutions, businesses, and companies like Western and McMaster, TD Canada Trust, and Learners Law Firm, to name a few. With a world-class speaking format, the audience, you guys today, will laugh and cry, think and act on everything Slay. Jen is a graduate of Western and McMaster University. She has 2 bachelor's and a master's degree. She is a certified trainer of extended disc and trained in EMDR therapy as well. She has spent 2 decades speaking, coaching, and counseling to support people in achieving the best version of themselves. Most recently, she was asked to be the host of a community television show called What's Up London, after co-producing an award-winning show called Melanated View. And she will potentially speak to it as well, but Jen is also newly named as the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Reconciliation. I'm getting that wrong.
Decolonization.
Decolonization for King's University in London as well. So very excited to have Jen joining us today, and I will be passing the mic over to her. So it's all yours, Jen.
Thank you. Okay, let's take a look at the quote that's on the screen. Companies that embrace diversity and inclusion in all aspects of their business statistically outperform their peers. Have you heard this before? Just throw it in the chat. Have you heard this before? I don't know if I'm seeing the chat or if people are just, yes, yes, yes. Oh, here it comes. Okay. So companies that have diverse and inclusive workforces are 35% more likely to outperform their competitors. Right? Inclusion in the workplace is one of the most important keys to retention, but there's some confusion as to what inclusion actually means. So I want to do a little bit of a survey, right? What does inclusion actually mean? If you could put inclusion in 2 or 3 words, what does it actually mean to be inclusive? I might want to restart. Others can hear. Okay, do I need to restart? Yes? Can you hear me?
No, Jen, you're good.
I'm good?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. All right, what does being inclusive mean? What does creating that inclusive environment, that inclusive culture really mean? Okay, so something's coming in. Comfortable in my workplace feels inclusive. All right, thank you, Christine. One thing that with regards to my talks, anytime I'm asked to do a workshop or facilitate, I'm very engaging. I like to engage with the crowd, and via Zoom, that means that you've got to work and type things into the chat. Everyone feeling like they can be themselves. Yes. Anything else? Any other thoughts with regards to inclusion? What does it mean to be inclusive? Equality for everyone. All right. Thank you. Thank you to those that put stuff in the chat. So what we're going to do is we're going to circle back to this at the end of my talk. Lack of bias. That's a good one. Thank you. Right. So what we're going to do, we're going to take a walk down Inclusive Lane today. And our first stop is What It's Not Avenue. Our next stop will be What It Is Street, and then we'll get to HTA Landing, which is How to Achieve. Okay. I like to have fun. If you talk to Melissa, I'm very corny, and so What It's Not Avenue. Let's look at what inclusion is not. Inclusion is not diversity, right? Oftentimes people will think, well, you know what, I am going to make sure that we have a diverse ethnic makeup, we'll have diversity in terms of all the different social locations, and that'll make this a really diverse and inclusive environment. But the thing where a lot of businesses fall short is that you bring in all of this talent, all of this diversity, and we don't ensure that they feel like they belong. We kind of skip that part out, right? You have everybody here, but you can't keep them because they don't feel like they belong. They don't feel like they can be their unique selves, right? So inclusion is not diversity. It goes beyond that, right? Inclusion is not tolerance, right? What does tolerance mean? Put it in the chat. What does tolerance mean? There might be a delay. However, tolerance for me means that you're putting up with me. Acceptance without understanding. That's a good one. But you're putting up with me. And I'm sure that we've all been in situations before where you could feel that someone is just putting up with you. And that doesn't feel good, right? It doesn't feel good. So inclusion is not tolerance, right? Someone said accepting something that you may not agree with, right? Yes, and we're going to get deeper into each of these. And inclusion is not a switch. It's not something that you can turn on and turn off. It's something that gets woven into who we are, right? So let's take a look at each of these 3 points that we see on the screen. Let's go a little bit deeper into that and get your fingers ready because I need you to participate with this part with regards to the chat, okay? So what diversity is, it's that presence of individual and group differences, right? So that could be in terms of race and ethnicity, gender identity, class, ability, and the intersections of these identities, right? So in terms of diversity, how do you contribute to, or how does your employer contribute to the diversity, the makeup of your workplace? What are some things that are going on? And I'll give you a moment to put that in the chat. The term diversity, it's now really commonplace, right, in many institutions, and it's found in a number of mission statements and strategic plans. But what does it really mean for you at your workplace? Right? Oftentimes people are thinking, well, we'll make sure that we have a certain number of men, certain number of women, that gender and the ethnicity when we're talking about diversity, but it's just so much more than that, right? In the chat, providing references to educate ourselves, hiring practices, conversations on backgrounds. Yes, conversations are so important. You can learn a lot about a person based on conversations as opposed to just looking at a resume or just looking at what they look like on the outside, right? Those conversations are so important because you want diverse points of view, right? Any other thoughts on diversity and the importance of diversity? Why is it important to have diverse people in your workplace? What are some of the concrete things, the positive things that happen when we have diverse people in the workplace? Diversity is the opportunity to learn from differing perspectives, growth, different outlooks on the same issues. Exactly. Thank you, Becca. Exactly. Different outlooks on the same issues. When you are in a workplace and everybody looks the same, everyone's social location is similar, the issue becomes that everyone's point of view is going to be similar. You're not going to have those different points of view, and you might miss things, right? Different outlooks on the same issue. Yes. Okay. So that's what we just read. Okay. So diversity is really important. We want to understand diversity. Now, given that you have diverse people in your workplace, diverse social locations in your workplace, you want to be very specific in how they feel included. How can you help them to be able to be uniquely themselves and to belong, right? Those are things that can't think of on your own. You have those through conversations like what Becca had written earlier, right? The conversation allows you to understand, what does this person need to feel like they are included here, to feel like they belong here? Tolerance. I know that I have been in situations where I can tell that I am just being put up with, right? That doesn't feel good, right? We want to make sure that we're not just, okay, I don't like this person. I don't want to really be around them, but I'm just going to put up with them. How can we get around that? Right? How can we get around? Sometimes people that we come up against and we're not feeling really good about them. The reason for that is because they're touching something that's kind of sensitive for ourselves, and we have to really reflect and kind of figure out, okay, what's going on for me here, right? Becca's saying, get to know them better. Yeah, get to know them better. I believe I'm a social worker, right? So I've been a social worker for the last 23 years. And so when I was in school, one of the things we were taught are that people are inherently good, but life experience oftentimes influence people to make certain choices and behave in certain ways that aren't necessarily good, right? So we want to get to know people better and kind of figure out what makes them tick, what's going on for them, right? Being inclusive really is about taking the time, and we're going to talk about that a little later, taking time to know who you're working with. And then a switch. It's not a light switch. You can't be one way at home and one way at work. It doesn't work that way. To be truly inclusive means that you're bringing that into the fabric of who you are, right? It's part of you. It's something that's woven into who you are as a person, right? Because one of the things that I'm learning with regards to this EDI space, right, is that someone is hired to do EDI work, and anytime there's any question, you go to that person, But truly what EDI work is bringing in all of the concepts and ideas into the whole organization. It's woven into everyone, right? And that takes time, it does, but it has to become part of who you are. It just does, right? Okay. All right. So that is what it's not avenue, right? Inclusion is not a switch. Inclusion is not diversity. Inclusion is not tolerance. So what is it? Right? Let's go to what is it street. Okay. Inclusion is when you feel that you belong and you can be uniquely yourself, quirks and all. Right? It means creating an environment where everyone feels welcome and where everyone feels valued. An inclusive environment can only be created once we're more aware of our own unconscious biases and have learned how to manage them. What can impact our ability to be inclusive? What do you think can impact our ability to be inclusive? I gave a couple of clues there already. But what impacts our ability to be inclusive? When you yourself feel uncomfortable? Yep. Because when we feel uncomfortable, we, whether intentionally or unintentionally, put up defenses, we put up walls, right? We keep people out, right? Unconscious bias, 100%. 100%. Anything else? What are things that impact our ability to be inclusive? When you help someone else feel like they are included, that's how you help people, okay? Going with the flow, yeah. going with the flow. Sometimes we don't agree with what's happening, but we don't want to stir the feathers, so we'll just go with the flow. And that can prevent creating the inclusive environment. When you think of yourself, how do you feel included? What needs to happen for you to feel like you can be uniquely yourself and belong to the organization or a networking group or whatever it is that you belong to, right? What needs to happen for you to feel included? Friendly vibes, people starting from a point of curiosity and truly wanting to learn and understand. Opinions are listened to. Yeah. Smiles help a lot, right? Those cues, the visual cues, right? But also seeing other people have fun and feel comfortable make me feel comfortable. Okay. Opinions are listened to. Yeah. Okay. Anything else? What makes you yourself feel like you are included or are in an inclusive environment? Lack of judgment. People greet you when you arrive or leave. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Okay. So when we look at inclusive environments, it's where people are respected, where people are valued, and where they are seen, right? Everything that everyone put in the chat, that's exactly right. Yeah. People can be their authentic selves and they're heard and feel safe sharing their ideas. Psychological safety is so important in creating that inclusive environment. Is it okay for people to share opposing opinions? Right? That's important because everything is fine and dandy when everyone agrees, but it's when there's opposing ideas. How do people act? Right? Is that the time when people start doing that silent treatment, start holding resentment, all of those kinds of things? That can really create a toxic environment. We have to be open to opposing ideas, especially if we are committed to diversity, because the whole point, or one of the points of diversity, is so that you can get those different opinions, right? Those different points of view, which means that not everyone is going to always agree with you, right? And so how do we make sure that we can have a disagreement, we can have opposing ideas, and we can still walk away and be okay? There has to be intentional planning with regards to all of this. It doesn't just happen. There's an element of intentionality that has to be had when we're talking about creating these inclusive environments. So we know what it's not, we know what it is. So how do we get there? How do we achieve this? 3 ways, right? We've got to get real with ourselves, right? We have to take responsibility, and that means everyone from every level within an organization needs to take responsibility, and we have to check ourselves constantly. Right? There are certain things that impact our ability to truly be inclusive, and those are what we've already mentioned. We've mentioned unconscious bias, and we've mentioned stereotypes. We've mentioned a number of those things, and that can really impact, right? But unconscious bias essentially is the thoughts and attitudes that we have that impact our actions and our decisions, so that we don't even realize that we have them, right? We don't even realize that we have them. But what are some things that you believe can create, or a part of your unconscious bias, right? Or it might be easier to think of a colleague that they don't even know that they're biased against. What are some things that influence unconscious bias? Media, 100% media. How you were brought up, yeah. Our childhood impacts us greatly because that is that first social network that we're introduced to, right? And so even though we might say, I'm never going to be like Grandpa Joe. Oh my gosh, Grandpa Joe has such racist ideas. Oh my gosh, right? But then it can seep into us in other ways that we don't even realize unconsciously, right? Where you are from, past experiences, lived experiences, yes. All of those things impact our bias. Now, here's the thing. Do you believe, and you can put yes or no in the chat, do you believe that the goal is to become unbiased? Is the goal to become unbiased? There's hesitancy with the chat. People are like, is this a trick question? Just put what you think. Do you think the goal is to become unbiased? There's a couple of no's in the chat. You're right. That's not the goal. Because the thing is, our biases are what help us to navigate the world. We have millions of bits of information that come at us every second, right? And our brains have to make sense of all of it. And so wherever it can make a shortcut, it's going to make a shortcut. And so that's where our biases come. The things that have influenced us and that influence us are going to impact how we see the world. And that's how we make snap judgments. That's how we make decisions. That's how we keep ourselves safe, right? We have biases. The goal is not to not have biases. The goal is to check the bias, right? Check how it is that you're feeling. Check how it is that you're making decisions. Why did you make that decision? What influenced you in making that decision? Why did you speak to that person in that way? What influenced you to speak to that person in that way, right? When you have gut reactions to certain things or to certain people, check yourself like, what's going on there, right? What's influencing that reaction? Find people in your circle that you're able to speak to and feel confident that you're able to talk to them about sensitive issues. Like, I felt this way when I spoke to so-and-so. I'm not sure what's going on there. And get their opinion of what they think might be happening for you. Like people that really know you, right? That might see something that you're missing, right? We've got to check the unconscious bias. Again, biases are not bad. I'm a psychotherapist, and I say this all of the time. Feelings are not bad. There's no such thing as a bad feeling. I know there's a house for good feelings and there's the bad feelings, but there's really no good or bad feelings. There's just feelings. They are informants. They're telling you something. Where we get into trouble is how we react or respond to those feelings, right? So we want to check the unconscious bias. And then when we look at microaggressions are those subtle behaviors that can lead someone to feel devalued, right? And oftentimes microaggressions can be people thinking that they're complimenting you when really it's an insult. So I'll give you an example. Oftentimes I have been told by white people as well as Black people that I am an Oreo cookie. And what they mean by that is that I'm Black on the outside and they say I'm white on the inside. And so I question, I'm like, well, what does that mean? Well, and the response I get is, well, Jen, you're very articulate, you're very educated. You're not, you don't speak in that ghetto type language. I'm like, oh, okay. So basically, in order to identify as being Black, you have to be uneducated, you have to be inarticulate, and you've got to be ghetto. Is that what I'm hearing? And then there's that, oh, no, that's not what I mean, right? And anyone who knows me knows that I'm not a person that's very confrontational or anything like that. So when I confront people that way, I do it with a smile and they really feel like an idiot, right? It's a gift. But microaggressions are more than that. essentially what I was saying with that is that they think they're paying a compliment, but it was really an insult, right? Other examples of microaggressions can be in the workplace would be being condescending or demeaning towards people, right? Oftentimes we can see this, especially in workplaces that might be dominated by a certain gender. They can be very demeaning and condescending to the other gender, right? Or non-binary as well, right? So just very condescending to anyone that's not like them, essentially. Showing little interest in the opinions or expressed by others, right? And that goes back to that tolerance piece. Sometimes what happens in a meeting, people will express their ideas, and you can tell that the leaders in that meeting are being tolerant because they're allowing the person to speak, but there's no intention of following through or even considering what that person is saying. That's not a way of being inclusive, right? And that's a microaggression that can happen. Addressing others in very unprofessional terms or excluding others from professional camaraderie, right? So having those cliques in the organization, right? That can really impact inclusiveness. Withholding valuable information from others. So which prevents them from being able to really do their job. Interrupting or speaking over others, taking credit for other people's ideas, doubting others, even on matters which are their responsibility. Right? We have to catch ourselves because sometimes we think, well, I know better, but if it's their expertise, sometimes we have to allow the people who know to do their thing. Right? Failing to welcome someone into a discussion, even when others are aware of their presence. These are all subtle microaggressions that can happen in a workplace that really impact the ability for that workplace to be inclusive. Yes or no in the chat, have you ever experienced any of these microaggressions? That was a quick yes. Yes. Okay. And how did it feel? Oh, lots of yeses. How did that feel? Demeaning. Sad and uncomfortable. Yeah. Any other feelings? Demoralizing. Yeah. And these are big words that people are using, that you're using, right? And so we want to check ourselves because in all honesty, we are all guilty of committing these microaggressions, not all of them, but one or two of them throughout our time in work. So we want to check ourselves to ensure that we're not doing that, because we see it's demeaning, it's sad, it's uncomfortable, it's demoralizing, right? It's not fun. Okay. So whose responsibility do you think it is to ensure that the culture is inclusive? Whose responsibility is that? Ours. Okay. It's everyone's, right? It's everyone's responsibility. Creating inclusive climates is all of our responsibility at every level of the organization. Leaders shape the climate of an organization, for better or worse. They really, really do. They are the role models for how the rest of the organization is going to function, right? And as a leader, it's important to be consistent in behaviors and in how people are treated, right? Leaders need to have clear goals and expectations. Leaders need to articulate and role model desired behaviors, right? It has to really start with the leaders, but it's not only their responsibility. As colleagues, as employees, we have to also be responsible for that inclusive climate. So that means we can support diversity goals, right, by being actively engaged. We can start by supporting employee resource groups, right? There are times when there's a group of people in an organization that want to get together and create a support group for one another, and there's pushback, right? Let's not push back. Let's allow people to feel supported within the organization, right? Oftentimes that pushback is from people that are outside of that community. And so they're worried, like, what are they going to be talking about in there, right? What's happening? Or they don't quite get it, right? We have to trust that people know what they need, right? And so we've got to move with it. We have to learn how to serve, right? Volunteer on different committees, become culturally competent, which means taking the time to learn about people that are different from you. Listen to understand, not necessarily to have a response, but to try to understand. Think about the different times that you've been in conflict with someone, and think about the reason why you have that conflict. Usually it's because you don't feel as though you are understood. You don't feel as though you are heard. Oftentimes you're okay probably with people disagreeing with you as long as you feel like they understand your viewpoint, right? So we want to make sure that we're trying to listen to understand. And we want to commit to continuously improving ourselves. I saw someone in the chat write earlier about emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence does not have a destination. We don't all of a sudden, oh, I'm emotionally intelligent, I've arrived, right? That doesn't happen. We're always growing, always, always, always. So always be on that journey, right? To grow. And again, slide didn't move. There we go. Check yourself constantly, all right? Be open to critique. Ask yourself why you feel the way you feel, why you did what you did. At the end of the day, just kind of reflect on your day and start having that conversation with yourself, or journal if journaling is good for you. And just sit and think, okay, so what did I do today? What decisions did I make today? Why did I make those decisions? What influenced those decisions? Again, in being inclusive and creating an inclusive environment, it doesn't just happen. It happens when you use intention. So you want to be very good at becoming more self-aware, which means that you need to take that time to be reflective of what you're doing and how you're contributing to the problem and to the solution. So some practical things when we're thinking about creating an inclusive environment. Look at the physical environment. What does the physical space look like? Representation matters. Are all the artwork that's on the walls, are they all from one particular type of artist, right? Do they all represent particular types of people, right? We want to make sure that there's a variety of people that we can see, variety of artists, different perspectives when we're looking at the walls, the different magazines that are in the office, right? Different books that are in the office, different resources. We want, just as important as it is to have diversity in terms of the people that make up the organization, you want there to be diversity in the different resources, diversity in the artwork, diversity in just the environment, right? You want to check attitudes, right? You want to have an inclusive attitude, which means that you have an open mind, which means that you're constantly being curious, right? Constantly working on yourself. You want to look at language, be mindful of the language you use, be mindful of the pronouns people want used for them, right? Use your time. One of the most beautiful things you can do is give someone your time. It's the most valuable resource you have. So instead of, hey, how are you doing? And you don't really care about the answer, try caring about the answer. Sitting with someone and saying, hey, what's going on? How are things going? How was so-and-so? Try and remember the last conversation you had and follow up with that. That makes someone feel included. It makes someone feel like you actually care, right? And again, curiosity is so important. Be genuinely curious. Learn about people that are different than you. Learn about people with different ideas and perspectives. Okay, that's all I got for you. If you have any questions, I am totally open to answering any questions you may have. It's been a pleasure being here. Thank you, Melissa, for inviting me.
We are very grateful to have had you, and thank you for sharing all of that. So we do have time, everybody, to open up to questions. If anybody has anything they would like to ask Jen, you can throw it in the chat or in the Q&A, and I can throw those questions to her.
You're welcome, Becca. My pleasure. I should probably stop sharing screen.
Everyone, they're not used to the interaction on our Exemplifies. They had to work today. It's good.
I don't like talking at people. I know when I go to a conference or anything, I like to interact. So I just assume others do too. Maybe it's not a good assumption. I don't know.
Yeah. Keeps us engaged.
Yeah. Uh-oh, what did I do?
Okay, so we have our first question, Jen. So the question is, how can leaders approach this? Are there resources available?
Approach what exactly? In terms of being inclusive? Approaching inclusivity? Yes? Okay. So you probably want to look at other organizations that are doing it well, right? You don't have to create anything, right? There's no point in recreating the wheel, but look at organizations that are doing it well and find out what they're doing and how they're doing it, and then start bringing that into your own organization, right? There's always there's the leader and there's the leadership team. You want to get your leadership team involved in this as well, right? And what you don't know or where you're lacking, be able to admit that. You have to take a hard look at your organization, and sometimes you might realize, oh, we're missing the mark here, here, and here. We need to be doing better, and then make that part of your strategic plan to make sure that you're doing better in those areas. Does that answer your question, Christine? Awesome.
Jen, are there resources that you would recommend? Like, are there books that people could look into, or programs or anything along those lines?
There are so many resources.
Can you recommend some books? See, look,
there's so many resources. So I am reading a book right now. Oh my goodness. Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for Trainers, it's called, but it's an excellent book for everyone. I cannot remember the name of the author, but I will get that to Melissa and then she can send that out. But that is a really excellent book. There are a couple of resources that I sent to Melissa to share with all of you. One of them is to kind of take a look at your organization and how inclusive is it. And the other one is creating a charter, right? So an agreement for your organization and how you're going to move forward with regards to inclusivity, EDI. And that is from Cornell University, and I have permission to share that with you. So they're really good.
Awesome. I would say one of the books that I've read recently it's not specific to DEI, but it does speak to it, is Wes Hall has written a book that is about his upbringing in Jamaica and his transition to Canada, and some of the things that he is doing to try and impact more representation in C-suite positions and executive positions across Canada. So his name is Wes Hall. He is the new dragon on Dragon's Den, and he's a Toronto businessman who is doing some really cool stuff with the Black North Initiative.
Mm-hmm.
No boots when you're bootstrapped. That's it, Becca. That's not the right, it's close to that title, but yes, that book. What about TED Talks or YouTube videos for those who don't have time to read?
So if you go on YouTube and you type in EDI, you're going to get a lot of stuff. One of the difficulties with regards to saying, well, you need to do X, Y, and Z to be more inclusive is that different organizations require different things, or they might be really good at one area and not in another area, right? So you want to kind of be doing that reflective work with regards to your organization, and then look for the resources that are going to support you in those specific areas.
Nick just put a question, really great question. So any thoughts around what organizations should be considering regarding goal setting when it comes to addressing D&I, and how to measure the right things?
What org should be considering with regards to goal setting? There's the City of London, their EDI office put out this document. Essentially, it allows you to really start asking yourself specific questions with regards to the goals that you have set for your organization, why you set them, what's the reason behind that, and where it's going, who was at the table when making those decisions. And I can forward that to Melissa as well, and she can share that, because it takes time. But again, this work takes time. And so it's a really good one to support in addressing DEI.
And Jen, with just to sort of add to Nick's question around measurements, do you have thoughts around like measuring diversity stats in the workplace and that side of things? Like, do you have an opinion on positive, negative?
I do have an opinion. I always have an opinion. So there are many organizations that have said, okay, so we're going to make sure that we have 3 Black people, 5 Indigenous people, this, right? And you want to be careful, because even though you want to make sure that you've diversified your workplace, if you're hiring someone just because they look a certain way, then that's tokenism, right? Because you need to have that conversation to find out where do they sit in the goals and initiatives, and where they sit with EDI in their own lives. Because you can have somebody, and I'll give this story. After George Floyd's murder, everybody decided that they had to diversify, which was great. However, I had 100 calls about, Jen, can you sit on this board? Jen, can you do this? Jen, can you do that? And the Grand Theater, they were being very intentional about diversifying their board. And they asked me, Jen, would you come on board? And they went through an interview process and all of that. And one of the things that I said to the president of the board is, when you're diversifying your board or your organization, you want to be mindful of the people that you're bringing on. Because let's say I could care less about EDI. Let's say that, you know, I'm very happy where I'm at. I achieved a lot in my life. I'm good. You know, everybody each his own. You don't necessarily want me on your board just because I'm Black, because I'm not going to be doing anything for you in terms of the diversity in EDI, right? You want to have those conversations, right? So when you're diversifying, you want to make sure that you know what that person's what their goals and their strategies are in terms of the EDI work. You want it woven into the fabric of people, not just something that they do. I hope that answered the question. I feel like I went around the block and back.
Any other questions for Jen before we wrap this up? Jen, on any of the resources we're sending out, is there contact information there in case people want to reach out about any of your programs?
I don't know if I did, but you've got every way of contacting me, Mel.
Okay.
You can share. You can
Perfect.
share
I
that
will
with
do that
people.
in case people think of things afterwards or have questions that they want to ask.
For sure.
Or private.
One thing I am going to make a shameless plug here. On January 27th, Western is putting on a TEDx, and I'm one of the speakers there. So if they're doing it hybrid, you can come in person or you can go online and attend virtually. It's $25 and it'll be a fun time. I'm in this session 2, just FYI.
Awesome. Amazing. So for everyone who joined us today, first off, thank you. Hopefully you got some great value out of this. We are lining up our next few speakers. So it's always the 3rd Tuesday of the month. Next month, we will have a speaker from the Achievement Center speaking about confidence in the workplace. So I'm very excited about that. And then in March, it's National Nutrition Month, and we will be having a dietitian speaking to us about emotional eating and how to work around that. So, and the mindset around food. So those are the things that are coming up in the next couple months. You will get this recording sent out to you, as well as the resources that Jen mentioned, and the information on the next upcoming event. So we would love to have you join us for our next one. And with that, we are all going to continue our days. So Jen, thank you so much for all of your knowledge and for your fun way of presenting it all today. That was awesome. And for anybody else, keep an eye out for that email from our marketing team, and we will go from there.
Thank you so
everybody.
much.